Good morning. Russian missiles and drones increasingly overwhelm Ukraine's defenses as technology transforms the war.
We'll hear from a reporter in Kyiv and to an expert on how the war is changing. Also, new medical codes could help people who regret their gender transition. And a longtime music publicist finally puts his own songs in the spotlight.
I said, if we pursue this now, I won't know my two sons, and we'll probably be divorced.
And world commentator David Closson on the politics behind Algaegate.
It's Thursday, August 20th. This is The World and Everything in It from listener-supported World Radio. I'm Myrna Brown.
And I'm Mary Reichert. Good morning.
Up next, Kent Covington with today's news.
President Trump says the U.S. has a trade deal with Canada, though the White House says nothing is signed just yet, and Trump's tariff deadline runs out tomorrow night. The president told reporters on Wednesday.
We had a very good conversation with the Prime Minister last night, and we've come to a deal with Canada. As you know, the 50% tariffs across the board were going on against Canada today.
The tariffs would hit 50%, but only on about $20 billion of Canadian goods. That is roughly 5% of what Canada sells in the U.S. Trump says Canada agreed to drop its tariffs on American farm goods, a long-running sore spot, because Canada tightly limits how much U.S. dairy can come in.
Farmers have been hurt very badly by Canada, and they won't be paying any tariffs anymore. And we may bring some of the tariffs down to a level where other countries are, because Canada was paying a higher tariff.
But Canada tells it differently. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc says his country's dairy protections came through, quote, entirely intact. Negotiators are still at the table. Reports say the U.S. would also cut its steel and aluminum tariffs on Canada in half. A former top advisor to Dr. Anthony Fauci has pleaded guilty to a felony conspiracy charge. World's Kristen Flavin reports.
David Morens admitted he steered government business to a private Gmail account to keep records about the origins of COVID-19 away from public records requests. The case centers on a federal grant to a New York nonprofit that funded coronavirus research at a lab in Wuhan, China, where the COVID outbreak began. Prosecutors say he also took wine and dinner offers from the scientist whose grant was at stake. He faces up to 5 years in prison. Prosecutors dropped 4 other counts in the plea agreement. Sentencing is slated for November. Dr. Anthony Fauci was not accused of wrongdoing in this case, and Fauci is shielded from federal prosecution after President Biden pardoned him before leaving office. For World, I'm Kristen Flavin.
Congo's Ebola outbreak has passed 5,000 cases, and it is still spreading faster than any Ebola outbreak in history. Nearly 2,400 people have died, almost half of everyone infected. Mobs have attacked health workers, with some of those workers walking off the job saying they aren't getting paid. Dr. Tierno Balde with the World Health Organization says they are working to better engage the community.
We are really recentering all of the operational approach, all of our activities, around the engagement of the communities.
He wants the motorbike taxi drivers on board, the men who carry sick people and dead bodies from village to village. The strain of the virus driving the outbreak still has no approved vaccine or treatment, and the agency expects this outbreak to pass the West African epidemic that killed more than 11,000 people a decade ago. Israel is facing fresh criticism from the Trump administration after an airstrike in Syria. World's Travis Kircher has that story.
Israel struck an airbase in northwest Syria this week, explaining that the goal was to prevent Turkish troops from deploying there. Turkey has close ties to the Syrian government and has had tense relations with Israel, as both countries try to curb each other's influence in the region. No one was hurt in the attack, but a runway was reportedly damaged. Syrian officials called the airstrike a violation of Syria's sovereignty. U.S. Ambassador to Turkey and Special Envoy for Syria Tom Barrack also condemned the attack, calling it an unjustified escalation. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said Syria had ignored Israel's warning that it was about to breach a previous agreement by allowing Turkish troops to deploy there. For World, I'm Travis Kircher.
Animal shelters in Texas are running out of room. A flesh-eating parasite called the New World screwworm turned up in Texas cattle back in June for the first time in 60 years, and now 44 states have restricted pets coming from affected areas. Aaron Grady is shelter director at the Houston Humane Society.
Houston has one of the largest stray pet populations, not only in Texas, but the country. So that presents unique challenges.
Texas sent nearly 89,000 dogs to shelters in other states last year, more than any other state. And Grady says they often look to transport animals to shelters with lower demand out of state.
Recently, though, some of those transports has either slowed down or halted out of a response due to the screwworm.
Texas also put down about 45,000 dogs last year, and shelters warn that number could climb. Nearly all confirmed cases of screwworm so far have been in livestock, not in pets. I'm Kent Covington, and still ahead, Russian missiles and drones are increasingly overwhelming Ukrainian defenses. And later, a longtime music publicist finally puts his own songs in the spotlight. This is The World and Everything in It.
It's Thursday, the 20th of August. You're listening to World Radio, and we're so glad you've joined us today. Good morning. I'm Myrna Brown.
And I'm Mary Reichard. First up on The World and Everything in It, a changing war. Ukraine this week launched one of its largest long-range assaults on Moscow since the war began, using more than 600 drones. The strike comes as drones and ground robots increasingly restrict troop movement along the front lines.
While Russia continues to pound Ukraine's power grid, Ukraine is targeting Russia's economy, including warehouses belonging to the country's largest online retailer.
In a moment, we'll speak to one of our world correspondents who is in Ukraine. But first, joining us is Katerina Stepanenko. She's Russia team lead for the Institute for the Study of War in Washington and a native of Kyiv. Katerina, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, if you would bring us up to speed, how well is Ukraine defending itself against Russia's missile and drone attacks right now? And what are some of the challenges it's experiencing?
Unfortunately, the Ukrainian stockpiles of Patriot interceptors have been dwindling for quite a bit of months, and Ukraine is increasingly facing challenges repelling Russian ballistic strikes, which has become a priority effort for Russian forces. Russia is using quite a bit of missiles that have a ballistic trajectory with the intent of exploiting the vulnerabilities and the shortages of the Ukrainian air defense capabilities. On top of that, Russia is also using jet-powered Shahed drones, which is a new adaptation of the Iranian-provided and Iranian-made drones that allow essentially Russian forces to fly drones at a faster speed at greater altitudes, making it harder for Ukrainian forces to intercept. Over the past months, Ukraine was pretty good at intercepting Russian long-range drones, but this adaptation is making it increasingly challenging for Ukrainians to counter additional strikes.
Well, Ukraine greatly expanded its drone campaign inside of Russia, hitting its bomber fleet, ports, energy infrastructure. What is Ukraine trying to accomplish with these strikes, and how does that strategy differ from Russia's?
I think there's several objectives here. Number one, I think it's bringing the war closer to Russia and making Russian people actually realize that Putin's decision to launch a long-term war against Ukraine will have sacrifices, increasing sacrifices for their lives. On the other hand, it's also putting pressure on the Putin regime. We are seeing quite a bit of people complaining about gas shortages, about the lack of various goods and products, both in occupied Ukraine and Russia. Lastly, the ongoing campaign against the wild berries, which is a Russian analog of Amazon, it is something that Russia has been using for military or dual-purpose goods, for procurement and storage of dual-purpose goods that Russia uses in its war effort in Ukraine. So all of these aspects are important. The other types of strikes that Ukraine has been conducting is Ukraine is using its domestically produced missiles, to go after Russian defense industrial base facilities, specifically the facilities that produce microchips and other very technically sophisticated equipment for Russian precision missiles and precision drones to eliminate the Russian drone strikes and missile strikes against Ukraine. They've also launched some strikes against the Russian infrastructure necessary for space capabilities to counter Russian efforts to create a Starlink of their own.
Katerina, I want to go back to this wild berries, as you said, Russia's equivalent to our Amazon. Why go after a commercial logistics network?
Well, Russia has been using it for dual-purpose goods, for example, procurement of drones or various other components that later on do feed into the Russian war effort in Ukraine. So it's a large sort of logistical hub for various different Russian components that supply and support the war effort.
Mm-hmm. What are you watching on the fronts of war beyond the battlefield? I'm thinking about certain socio-cultural aspects outside of what we normally associate with war.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's quite interesting to see that Putin felt it so necessary to eliminate the only anti-war party that likely didn't have any chance of succeeding in the elections. This party is called the Yabloko Party. Which tells me a little bit about how unconfident Putin is about this referendum that he's trying to make, which is posing these elections, these State Duma elections, as a referendum on the ongoing Russian public support for the war. He's trying to present this election as all of these Russian people are continuing to support the war and his vision for the long-term conflict in Ukraine and possibly against the West. And he was so unconfident in himself that he had to eliminate a party that didn't really have much traction in the Russian information space until he made them into a martyr.
Katerina Stepanenko is Russia team lead for the Institute for the Study of War. Katerina, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
One of our world correspondents returned to Ukraine about a week ago. Lindsay Mass connected with him and wanted to bring him back on to find out how things have changed since he was last there.
Thanks, Mary and Myrna. Longtime listeners may recall Caleb Weldy's reports from Ukraine in 2025. He returned just over a week ago to the capital city of Kyiv, so I called him up to find out what he's seeing there. Caleb, good morning.
Good morning.
Caleb, you were last in Ukraine at the end of last year. Can you compare what it was like then to what you've experienced since being back?
The alarms are going off a lot more than they were when I was here last time. Last time it'd be on average 3 or 4 times a day. Now it's 6-8 times easily. Yesterday they went off 10 times during the day, and that counts, all hours of the night as well. So the other different thing is that there's much more missiles coming in than there were when I was here last. I'm in one of the nicest parts of the city right now, surrounded by embassies. There's a U.S. embassy building just a block from where I was staying. And at 3 a.m., a bunch of missiles came in, close enough to where I just immediately, asleep, but hit the floor and went into the bathroom, as that's the safest place. I'm told that people are taking the alarms a lot more seriously now. Before you used to have 30 minutes, an hour of notice before the shaheeds reached the city. So you could gather your things, you could go to the car park, the basement of your building, whatever you wanted to do, metro. But now, those missiles hit while the alarms are still going off, maybe 45 seconds, a minute of warning. So now there's not time for people necessarily to get to safety.
I know you've been out, on the streets. How does the damage compare to when you were there before?
Well, most of my time has been in the center of the city, and I have to say I am surprised. I went to my favorite coffee shop for the first time a few days ago, which is in the very center of the city. If you've seen any picture of Kyiv, you've probably seen in the central square, there's a large pillar with a statue of a woman on top. the Maidan Memorial, and this coffee shop is 200 yards from there. And I went, sat down in my normal spot, and the window was gone. And then I noticed, the other windows were damaged, and they said, that was around 2 months ago. Sunday evening, I went to a concert, an open-air concert set in the middle of some really, really nice apartment buildings. And on the way in, there was clearly evidence of an explosion of some sort. And I talked to the security guard. He said, missile, 2 a.m., killed a man and a woman. Sounds like a baby was injured. He was shaking with anger, telling me about this. Said this is, 200 yards from where this orchestra was practicing.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any signs of rebuilding at this point?
I do, yeah. Just anecdotally, the church I'm going to is doing an addition. My landlord was showing me, the apartment he's remodeling. People are definitely just continuing life here.
I know you said you had talked to people about the war, and you, of course, were talking to them when you were there before. When they talk about the war, how has that changed?
That's a difficult question. I asked the people I was talking to on the street last night, and I said, how many people do you know that have been killed in the war, personally? And he said 10 close friends. He wanted to make sure that was clear, close friends in his, immediate circle. And then I was talking to 3 soldiers a few minutes later, and I asked them, and they said, the first guy said 10 close friends, and then the next guy said 25. He wanted to be clear. He said he's an instructor, and he wanted to be clear. He said that's not counting, soldiers that I've trained. And then the third guy said he didn't seem to want to answer. He said he's on a number of chats from the different military assignments he's done, group chats, and that, when someone is killed, they post on those chats, but that he said he tries not to check the chats because it's psychologically too difficult. And then I also asked a gal at a coffee shop this morning how many she knew that had died, and she said around 25, counting like friends of her parents. And I actually asked her, I said, what gives you hope? And she just looked at me with just a very flat look and said, well, to be honest, I've tried to take my life 3 times recently. It didn't seem like she had a lot of hope without Christ.
Caleb, last time you were there, you had a piece of reporting that we ran where essentially people were going about their lives as sirens and warnings went off, and that war was something that was coexisting with a somewhat regular life. How would you assess that now?
I would say that's definitely still true. I mean, like I said, the alarm's going off 10 times yesterday. It's too much, to go to a shelter every time. But then there's also, like that gal in the coffee shop, she said one of her coworkers' close friends was killed. And she said another friend came really close to being killed, by a rocket here in the city. So, yeah, I mean, everyone seems to be carrying on for sure, but it's just the new normal, I guess.
Caleb Weldy joining us from Kyiv. Caleb, thank you so much, and we're praying for your safety.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Good to talk to you.
Additional support comes from Asbury Graduate Studies, Christ-centered master's degrees that help advance careers and deepen impact. asbury.edu/graduate. From WorldWatch, a 10-minute video news broadcast that the whole family can agree on. Free for the first 7 days. worldwatch.news/podcast. And from Boyce College, which educates students to serve Christ with conviction in ministry and the marketplace. Shaped by Scripture and ready for life. BoyceCollege.com.
Up next, medical cheat codes. The Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, is investigating possible misuse of insurance billing codes by doctors disguising transgender procedures performed on minors as other forms of treatment. HHS Assistant Secretary Brian Christine.
Millions of dollars spent, hundreds of thousands of families misled, medical best practices rewritten or cast aside to serve this new agenda.
The Biden administration threatened doctors with loss of federal funds for refusing to provide sex-rejecting procedures, which LGBT activists often call gender-affirming care.
But the Trump administration has reversed course and is now looking at penalties for hospitals administering those procedures. World's Harrison Waters reports from Washington.
Last fall, HHS published a report that found there's little solid evidence to support using hormone treatments or surgeries to treat kids confused about their sex. Around that time, HHS called Dr. Aaron Cariotti with the Ethics and Public Policy Center, asking for help with another question.
How is it that so many hospitals and clinics, including at major academic medical centers, so readily embraced procedures that were not supported by sound scientific evidence?
The new report, published last week, counts more than 225 gender clinics in the U.S. Insurance doesn't always cover what they do, so many of them appear to be misusing disease codes used in billing. For example, precocious puberty is a condition found in fewer than 1 out of every 5,000 children and starts before age 8 for girls or 9 for boys. But Dr. Cariotti says,
what we found was thousands of patients diagnosed with precocious puberty between the ages of 13 and 17, all the way up to the age of 22, in fact.
Those teenage patients were then prescribed puberty blockers. Double mastectomies on girls were coded as breast reduction surgeries, while cross-sex hormones were billed under endocrine disorder unspecified. And Cariotti says those discrepancies would have been difficult to get past hospital compliance offices.
Unless they were told to do so by hospital leadership, unless hospital leadership said, this is how we're going to go about doing this.
World asked the American Hospital Association about the report, but they declined to comment. The American Academy of Pediatrics has previously objected to HHS blocking funds for transgender procedures on minors. It says the move intrudes into doctor-patient relationships. Cariotti and 9 other researchers went through government and private insurance claims. They found upwards of $50 million in potentially fraudulent billing for puberty blockers alone.
A lot of this was Medicare billing, but people who pay premiums for private insurance are also being defrauded by this thing.
Till now, doctors have had no agreed-on way to treat patients who want to undo the damage. That's allowed many medical groups to claim the only road forward for those who have started transgender treatments is to continue them, no going back. But emergency room Dr. Jared Ross says a new disease code from HHS could help change that.
There's an F64.A code, which is gender identity disorder in remission.
Meaning detransitioning can now go in a patient's chart as a medical condition. Dr. Ross says that code will help doctors treating young people who regret receiving body-altering procedures.
What do we do with a boy who had his testicles cut off at 18 and now wants to live as a boy? How do we get him off estrogen? How do we get him on testosterone? He's got to be on one or the other. If you don't have sex hormones, your bone density is just going to plummet.
Dr. Cariotti says more research is needed, along with insurance companies willing to cover restorative procedures.
We can't completely undo the damage that was done, but at least do whatever we can, whatever's medically and psychologically possible to mitigate that damage. That is the very least we owe to these young people who were railroaded into this before they knew what was going on and harmed in the process.
For now, the Department of Justice is looking into whether hospitals and clinics broke the law in how they billed for transgender procedures. Reporting for World, I'm Harrison Waters in Washington.
Police in Dunellen, New Jersey recently went undercover, way undercover. The department posted a photo of an officer disguised as a shrubbery, literally covered in foliage, but with binoculars and hands visible. Police later clarified that the costume was mainly for the social media picture. He did not spend the entire 6-hour crackdown rooted to one spot. You see what I did there? No, during the actual operation, officers watched for drivers using their phones. Police say they caught some FaceTiming. Others they caught holding phones with two hands and steering with their knees. In all, 74 citations issued. So the shrub may have been mostly for show, but those tickets and fines, those were for real. It's the world and everything in it.
Today is Thursday, August 20th. Thank you for turning to World Radio to help start your day. Good morning. I'm Myrna Brown.
And I'm Mary Reichard. Coming next on The World and Everything in It, the new album by the music industry's most fascinating PR man. In the late 1980s, Lance Cowan began a career that made him the top Americana music publicist. His clients included Nancy Griffith, Lyle Lovett, Guy Clark, Gatemouth Brown, and Joe Ely.
But since 2024, Cowan has released 3 critically acclaimed albums of his own. World's music reviewer Arsenio Orteza spoke with him about his unusual odyssey.
There's a sarcastic education cliche that goes, those who can, do, those who can't, teach. A music industry version might go, those who can make music, those who can't work in PR. Lance Cowan, however, is proving that cliche wrong.
But it's like sunlight in the morning, the thing that feeds your soul, that gives your life its meaning. It's the thing you need the most.
This is The Air That You Breathe, the title cut of Cowan's new album. Its lyrics tell the story of a singer-songwriter whose passion is music, but who has to wait till his hair turns gray before he gets the attention he deserves. It's a story not unlike Cowan's.
About 4 years ago, I thought, I've got these songs that nobody's hearing. How am I going to get people to hear them? Well, a friend of mine, he writes novels, and he said, well, here's what you do. You get up every day and you write 1 page. And before long, you're writing 20 pages. And I thought, every day, I'm supposed to be in the office at 9:30. I'm going to come in every day at 8 and spend that hour and a half working on my music.
By the time he made that decision, Cowan was securely established as a publicist, but he started out wanting to be a musician. In fact, the music licensing group BMI sent him to Toronto in 1991 to play a career-launching showcase. What he saw there was hundreds of like-minded hopefuls all competing for a break. The young husband and father of 2 made a hard choice.
Home is where the heart is, and darling, my heart belongs to you. Then no matter where I travel, darling, I'm home with you.
This is Home With You, the song that closes Cowan's new album. The final stanza goes, they call this suitcase living, but it feels like dying to me, because if you can't hold your lover, what good is your dream? It's a lot like what was running through Cowan's head 35 years ago.
I told my wife, I said, you know, if we pursue this now, I won't know my 2 sons, because they were young then, and I said, we'll probably be divorced. And so I said, I think it'd be best to focus on PR.
Cowan's PR focus did not keep him from performing. He's played off and on at Nashville's Bluebird Cafe for decades, and he didn't entirely stop writing either. His schedule may have been busy, but when someone like the folk icon Janis Ian wants to write a song with you, you say yes.
When he was here, she would smile. They would laugh for a while. She would ask, am I still your only one?
This is When He Was Here, a song that Cowan wrote with Ian and which Ian herself recorded over 30 years ago.
And I got to tell you, I was so nervous about writing with her. And she was so remarkably kind and made me so comfortable writing. And we wrote that song together.
When He Was Here is about a divorcing couple and the divorce's effect on the children. Cowan says it reflects Ian's experience rather than his, but he doesn't mind portraying characters when he sings, or being a third-person narrator, or leaving his narrative songs open-ended. His audience, he says, is pretty intelligent and doesn't need to be spoon-fed. Cowan's pretty sharp himself. He laughed and said, "I'm not deep," when I pointed out the depth of the lyrics, "You've got to believe before you see, trust before you feel, hope before you find," in his song Love. But it's wise advice for the deep and the not deep alike.
I have become
I'm Arsenio Orteza.
an older man. In the wink of an eye, the wave of a hand, and I have tried to understand.
Good morning. This is The World and Everything in It from listener-supported World Radio. I'm Mary Reichard.
And I'm Myrna Brown. Algae-gate is mostly dead, though Attorney General Todd Blanche says the Justice Department is waiting for a D.C. Superior Court judge to rule on whether it stays dead. Prosecutors now acknowledge that damage blamed on vandals was actually caused by a rushed, faulty installation.
But World Opinion's commentator David Closson says that in a country divided between red and blue, even the green in the reflecting pool was bound to become partisan.
Sweethearts. Everybody's proud of you. You are single-handedly doing more to fight fascism than any American has. Yes.
She was not speaking to a child or cheering on an athlete. She was speaking to an aquatic nuisance. That is where American politics arrived this summer. Algae with a constituency. The green bloom appeared in the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool shortly after the Trump administration completed a multi-million-dollar renovation. The work was part of a broader effort to prepare Washington for America's 250th anniversary. President Donald Trump had personally promoted the project, promising that the new surface would last for decades.
This will last for at least 50 years, and you'll never have a leak.
Instead, the water quickly turned green and portions of the new blue coating began to peel. The administration deserves scrutiny. Questions about the project's cost, its no-bid contracts, and the compressed timeline around the July 4th festivities were legitimate. So were questions about the president's response. Trump repeatedly blamed vandals, at one point suggesting that someone might have put fertilizer into the pool.
Somebody said they might have put fertilizer. They did something to create the algae.
But algae hardly requires a political conspiracy. The reflecting pool has suffered recurring blooms for years. A large, shallow body of barely moving water sitting in direct summer sunlight is practically an invitation. In one widely publicized vandalism prosecution, that of former Olympic canoeist David Hearn, was dropped after prosecutors said the evidence pointed elsewhere. The president's insistence on sinister enemies helped keep the story alive, but his critics were happy to help.
Let's grow, algae. Let's grow.
A small group calling itself Team Algae gathered nearby. There were green pom-poms, pro-algae signs, and a protester wearing an inflatable frog costume. One chant declared, "Pond scum matters." The protesters were joking, of course. They said the absurdity was the point, a way of ridiculing an administration they despise. But jokes can still reveal our loyalties. The algae had become welcome because it embarrassed Donald Trump. Literal pond scum had been drafted into the resistance, and the media joined.
Now live from the reflecting pool, our chief algae correspondent.
The water's green, and visitors are seeing red.
For 1.6 billion years,
algae had been undefeated.
Reflecting pool with the algae is really a metaphor of the way he is governing.
News programs covered the story with mock seriousness, with on-scene reports, water sample results, and political analysis on the meaning of microscopic organisms. Commentators repeatedly declared the pool a perfect metaphor for the Trump presidency. One national podcast devoted 26 minutes to what it called the reflecting pool fiasco. Certainly, journalists are free to criticize public officials. Satire is no sin. But the episode reveals what happens when political opposition becomes an identity. We stop asking whether something is true, good, or beneficial. We ask only whether it helps our side or humiliates the other. The administration displayed its own version of the same temptation. Every loose piece of hastily installed coding became evidence of malicious enemies. Christians should recognize the danger. Scripture teaches us to love truth more than political advantage, and our neighbors, even our enemies, more than our parties. Political animosity disorders those loves, teaching us to treat an opponent's failure as our success and the country's pain as our opportunity. Team algae appears on both sides. Christians should not join it. When our enemy's embarrassment becomes our good news, something unhealthy is growing in us. And pond scum is a strange foundation for the country's future. For World, I'm David Closson.
Tomorrow, John Stonestreet will be here for Culture Friday. And a popular British children's series comes to life on the big screen. We'll have a review of The Magic Faraway Tree. That and more tomorrow. I'm Mary Reichard.
And I'm Myrna Brown. The world and everything in it comes to you from World Radio. World's mission is biblically objective journalism that informs, educates, and inspires. The Bible says, "Therefore, as you received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk in him, rooted and built up in him, and established in the faith, just as you were taught, abounding in thanksgiving. See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ. For in him the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily, and you have been filled in him, who is the head of all rule and authority." Verses 6 through 10 of Colossians 2. Go now in grace and peace.